Namaste Bharat. My name is Kiran Ravindra Mistry and I am an intern in Law Chamber of Siddharth Murarka, and today's webinar is being hosted by me. Today we have a speaker by Kushal Moore, practicing counsel, Bombay High Court and expert in criminal laws, and he will be speaking on today's topic, that is corporate criminal liability. Now I hand over the session to Shri Kushal sir for enlightening his vast knowledge and experience on the said topic. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Kiran. Hello, everyone. Before I start, standard disclaimer which I give for all the webinars, that since I am in Yatmal, we deal with a couple of challenges. One is of electricity as well as the internet. So in the event that I do get logged off, please bear with me. I'll log in again immediately. Before I delve into today's topic, I must thank Mr. Murarka and his entire chamber, who have been working tirelessly last 2 months, bringing you webinars day after day. And thank you so much for organizing this series. Coming to today's topic, I'll just share my screen. Yes, corporates and criminal liability. Now, what I'm going to cover today in this topic is a brief introduction. Then I will analyze the judgments, the landmark judgments of the Supreme Court, and how this concept has evolved. First, whether a company can be held criminally liable. Second, who can represent a corporation in court. Third, the stricter liability, wherein the statute itself provides for liability of directors, so vicarious liability, and the judgments relating to vicarious liability. And lastly, the recent positive trend, wherein courts have held that non-executive directors cannot be held liable simpliciter, and there has to be something more to make the non-executive directors liable. So this is what I am going to try and cover in today's webinar. I will try and keep it short, and then we can do some questions at the end. So before I proceed, I think by now everybody knows that companies can be held liable and companies can be prosecuted. However, corporate criminal liability, if you want to define the term, means that the extent to which a corporation or a company can be held criminally liable for its own acts and also for the acts of its employees or the natural persons who are employed by it. So that is what corporate criminal liability means. Like I said, by now, you all know that companies can be held liable. And in fact, if you see section 11 of the IPC and the definition of person, the definition of person includes any company or association or body of persons, whether incorporated or not. So as far back as when the IPC was drafted, any prohibition against persons would include a prohibition against company, and therefore a company was to be prosecuted. However, there are two major obstacles in this scheme of things. First is that the universal basic, the first principle of criminal law is that for any act or omission to be held to be criminally liable, it must be shown that there is a guilty mind, mens rea, right? Now, obviously, a company cannot have any mens rea. So, therefore, that is one first main obstacle to prosecuting a company. And the second one is that if an offense prescribes mandatory sentence of imprisonment, then how do you execute that against a company? Because, of course, a company cannot be physically jailed. So, these are the two main obstacles in prosecuting a company. Now, let us see how the Supreme Court has evolved the law and what is the position now. The first judgment we see in this case is of Standard Chartered Bank versus ED in 2005. This was a landmark judgment, groundbreaking, because it overruled all other previous views. And the Constitution bench held that. Sorry, I'll tell you briefly the facts. The facts in this case was that Standard Chartered Bank was being prosecuted under Section 56 of FERA, which is now defunct. That is the Foreign Exchange Regulation Act. And that section provided for a mandatory sentence of imprisonment. So the argument by the bank was that since the company cannot be imprisoned, therefore the company can also not be prosecuted under this section. The second limb of the argument was that, however, if a lesser section provides only for a sentence of fine, then the company would be prosecuted for that lesser offense. However, for the graver offense, which provides for imprisonment also, the company cannot be prosecuted, and therefore this was the argument before the court. The court held that, and I will quote unquote, that it is sheer violence to common sense that the legislature intended to punish the corporate bodies for minor and silly offenses and extended immunity of prosecution to major and grave economic crimes. So the court rubbished that argument and said it defies common sense that a company can be prosecuted for a lesser offense which has the punishment of fine only and be let off on the graver offense which includes a mandatory sentence of imprisonment. So the court finally held, and it was a constitution bench judgment, and all of you must read because it makes for a very good reading. The court finally held that if the section imposes a sentence of fine as well as a mandatory sentence of imprisonment, where the section says can be sentenced to fine and imprisonment up to so and so. So in that case, the court has a discretion which can be exercised, and the court may award only the punishment of fine to the company and not award the punishment of sentence. And that discretion is to be read in all these sections. So this is how we got around one of the two obstacles, that is of imprisonment. And after this judgment, then it became clear that in whichever case a company is to be prosecuted, and that includes a mandatory sentence of imprisonment, the company could be prosecuted and sentenced only to fine, and there was no need to give a separate sentence of imprisonment. With regard to the second obstacle of mens rea, the court in Standard Chartered Bank, the Constitution bench did not deal with this concept, and in fact clearly stated that we are not getting into the issue of whether a company can possess mens rea. So therefore, it was another 5 years before a definitive pronouncement on that issue came up. And in the case of Iridium India versus Motorola, which was in 2010, and the facts were that Iridium India launched a criminal prosecution before the Pune Magistrate Court against Motorola for the offenses of cheating and criminal breach of trust, read with criminal conspiracy. Motorola had issued some placement offers wherein it had represented that if you invest in this project, there will be several gains to be made. However, later on that project became unviable, and therefore then Motorola, which had heavily invested into the project, sued Iridium, stating that those were misrepresentations. After the process was issued by the Pune Magistrate Court, the matter was challenged. The process was challenged before the Bombay High Court, and the Bombay High Court held that one of the main grounds that the Bombay High Court held was that since a company could not possess mens rea, therefore no offense of cheating can be made out, and basically quashed the complaint. The same was taken up before the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court in Iridium finally developed the doctrine of alter ego. Concept of alter ego was evolved, and this concept of alter ego basically states it personifies the company, and the company is considered to be the alter ego of the individual. So whatever the individual has thought or done can be imputed to the company. Alter ego of the company, personal group of persons guide the business of the company, would be imputed to the company. So this is very important. Please, I'll pause here, that it is the mens rea of the individual which is considered to be the mens rea of the corporation, not vice versa, right? This is important because it will come up later during our during the further webinar. And therefore, Supreme Court set aside the High Court order. So, in this manner, Standard Chartered and Iridium basically set the framework for evolution of the doctrine of corporate criminal liability in India, and overcame both the obstacles. One is of the guilty mind, and second is of what to do if the section provides for mandatory sentence of imprisonment. What about practically? How do you take a corporation to court, or how do you get a corporation on trial, and what is the procedure in regard to that? So the CRPC in fact provides for a procedure when the corporation or registered body is an accused. Subsection 1 states, corporation means an incorporated company or other body corporate, includes a society. 2 is important, wherein states where a corporation is the accused person or one of the accused persons in an inquiry or trial, it may appoint a representative for the purpose of inquiry or trial, and such appointment need not be under the seal of the corporation. So therefore, whenever a corporation is an accused, the corporation can appoint anybody as its representative, and that person can represent the corporation before the court. Now, 3 is also important, wherein states where a representative of a corporation appears, any requirement of this code that anything shall be done in presence of the accused shall be read, shall mean that it has been done. So therefore, when a charge is to be read to an accused, when the representative appears, it will mean that the charge is read to the company. So CRPC already provides for this under 305, and this is how a corporation can be represented before the court. Now, like I said, if you remember that the mens rea of the individual can be attributed to the company, but can it be vice versa? When can directors be held to be liable? So the famous 2G Spectrum scam case, wherein Sunil Bharti Mittal, the magistrate, holding that since the company was an accused, the directors of the company are also to be held liable, and the magistrate took the reverse scenario, that if the company is an accused, the directors definitely will be held to be liable, and issued process against the directors also. However, this matter then traveled to the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court applied the cardinal principle of criminal law, that there is no vicarious liability unless the statute specifically provides, and quashed the prosecution. Court relying upon Iridium stated that the principle of attribution is applied to impute criminal intention to the company on account of criminal intention of its alter ego, and cannot be applied in a reverse scenario to make the directors liable for offenses committed by the company. Director can only be prosecuted if there is sufficient evidence of his active role coupled with criminal intent, or where the statutory regime itself attracts the doctrine of vicarious liability by specially incorporating such a provision. So, therefore, unless and until the statute provides for such a provision, and we look at several such statutes where the stricter liability is imposed, it cannot be that the director is to be held liable. And the court also held that if at all during the course of trial the magistrate feels that there is some wrongdoing on part of the director, he can always summon the director under section 319. So this was another landmark judgment which clarified that directors by itself cannot be held to be an accused just because the company is an accused. What happens in real life today is very different, wherein the prosecuting agencies want a face to the crime, and therefore, as a matter of course, not just companies but directors are also prosecuted along with the company. And you see many of such cases almost on a daily basis nowadays in the newspapers. So this very important judgment of Sunil Mittal, wherein the court clarified that there is no vicarious liability. Now let us look at the doctrine of vicarious liability, as there are several statutes in India which provide for this stricter liability, which wherein you don't need to do a particular act to be vicarious liable. And just because you're holding a position in the company, your liability is based on the powers and responsibilities that you're holding in the company. So this is the doctrine of vicarious liability. And some of the acts which provide for such a liability: Essential Food Commodities Act, the Prevention of Food Adulteration, Negotiable Instruments, which most of you would know, Environment Protection Act, the Securities and Exchange Board of India Act, IBC, and the PMLA. These are some of the examples. There are many other acts also which provide for such a liability. I am going to examine Section 141 of the NI Act, and all the sections which provide for vicarious liability are pari materia, in as much as they are exactly the same as this section under Negotiable Instruments Act. So we will look at this section as an example so that you get an idea, and also look at the judgments. Offenses by companies. First, if the person committing an offense under 138 is a company, every person who at the time of offense was committed was in charge of and responsible to the company for the conduct of business of the company, as well as the company, shall be deemed to be guilty of the offense. So it is a deeming provision wherein every person who at the time when the offense was committed, it's very important that it cannot be at any time that you are a director. It is only when the offense was committed, if you are in charge of and responsible to the company for conduct of business, then you shall be liable and shall be proceeded accordingly under this section. So this is 141.1, and 141.2 states, nothing withstanding contained in subsection 1, where any offense under this act has been committed by a company and it is proved that the offense has been committed with consent or connivance of, or is attributable to any neglect on part of any director, manager, secretary, such director, manager, secretary or other shall also be deemed to be guilty. So this is a further, this is a section which further adds to the subsection 1. So this is how the section reads, and basically the three important attributes to this section are that you need to be in charge and responsible for the conduct of the company. Second, it has to be when the offense was committed. And third, once these two things are satisfied, then automatically you are deemed to be liable. So this is vicarious liability, and it's a strict provision, and many acts employ it. Now, some of the judgments which have clarified the law on this aspect, because it was becoming a trend that almost all the directors were being made and accused, and it still continues in fact, and were prosecuted. And until you challenged that order and got it quashed from the High Court, you would face the humility and also the harassment of going to the trial court, seeking bail and standing trial. So some of the judgments which have clarified this position are: first one is the SMS Pharma versus Nita Bhalla in 2005, when it says vicarious liability of a person arises in terms of section 141 of the NI Act. In SMS Pharma, it was held as follows: what is required is that the persons who are sought to be made criminally liable under section 141 should be, at the time of offense was committed, in charge of and responsible to the company for the conduct of business. This we have already covered. And every person connected with the company shall not fall within the ambit. This is clear. Liability arises from being in charge of and responsible at the relevant time, and not on the basis of merely holding a designation or office in the company. So this was one very important clarification, that just because you're holding a designation does not mean that you will be held to be liable, but the complaint has to show in what manner you are in charge of for the conduct, and what is it specifically that you did to fall under the ambit of this provision. Conversely, a person who is not holding any office or designation still may be liable if he satisfies the main requirement of being in charge and responsible. So this was the first judgment which clarified that just because you have a designation in the company doesn't mean that you are automatically liable under the section, but something more has to be shown for you to be prosecuted. Second one is KK Ahuja, which was in 2009, which talked about managing director and joint managing director and said the mere prefix of managing to the word director shows that you are in charge of for the conduct of the business of the company, and therefore nothing more is required if your designation is a managing director or a joint managing director. And second, in case of director, secretary, manager, or person referred to in Companies Act, an averment in the complaint that he was in charge of and responsible for the conduct of the business is necessary to bring the case on. No further averment would be necessary. So, secondly, it said that you have to make this averment. There has to be a specific averment in your complaint that so-and-so person having so-and-so designation was in charge and responsible for conduct of the business of the company. So these are the two important judgments. There are many others. Of course, all these judgments are with respect to Section 138 and with respect to Negotiable Instruments Act. However, the same principle will be applicable even for the other acts, naturally, because considering the volume of cases under the Negotiable Instruments Act, only those cases have managed to travel up to the Supreme Court, and the law has been crystallized with regard to negotiable instruments cases. However, the same principle will be applicable to all other acts wherein the principle of vicarious liability has been enshrined. Lastly, what about cases with regard to non-executive directors, and what about the liability of the non-executive directors? So there has been a recent positive trend wherein the courts have held that a differentiation was the Companies Act, the new Companies Act makes it mandatory that a certain percentage of the directors on the board of a company I lost you. Just share my screen again. So therefore, one of the first judgments wherein this concept of non-executive director was taken up by the Supreme Court is of Pooja Ravinder Devidasani versus State of Maharashtra and Ananda, wherein the Supreme Court decided the issue of vicarious liability, and this is what it said, that non-executive director is no doubt a custodian of the governance of the company, but does not involve in the day-to-day affairs of the running of its business and only monitors the executive activity. To fasten vicarious liability under Section 141 of the Act on a person at the material time that the person shall have been at the helm of affairs of the company, one who actively looks after the day-to-day activities of the company and particularly responsible for the conduct of its business. Simply because a person is a director of a company does not make him liable under the NI Act. Every person connected with the company will not fall into the ambit of the provision. Time and again, it has been asserted by this court, only those persons who are in charge and responsible conduct so and so. A director who was not in charge of and was not responsible for conduct of at the relevant time will not be liable for an offence under 141 of the NI Act. So therefore, it was one of the first judgments where it was clearly spelled out that a non-executive director, though is a custodian, but does not involve himself or herself in the day-to-day functioning of the business of the company. This was later on followed by another judgment of the Supreme Court in Chintalpati Srinivasa Raju versus SEBI, where the Supreme Court held that non-executive directors are the persons who are not involved in the day-to-day affairs of the company, not in charge of, not responsible for the conduct of business of the company. Subsequently, after these two judgments of the Supreme Court, several high courts, including the Gujarat High Court and recently the Delhi High Court, have also passed some fantastic judgments wherein they have clearly differentiated the role of the non-executive director as being different from the other directors on the board of the company and held that they should not be prosecuted. So this is a welcome change from the law, from the earlier position wherein all the directors were prosecuted and trial was held against them. Now coming to the question, a very important question, that suppose a company is not prosecuted, then can a director or an officer of a company be prosecuted for an offense without arraigning the company itself as an accused? So sometimes it happens, and I have seen a lot of complaints wherein only the directors of the company are prosecuted, and there is no only the directors are prosecuted. However, the company is not arraigned as an accused. So the Supreme Court, in the matter of Anita Hada versus Godfather Travels and Tours, in a 3-judge bench judgment, held that it is necessary and mandatory that the company is also made as an accused, and without arraigning the company as an accused, the directors cannot be prosecuted, and if at all only the directors are prosecuted, then that complaint is liable to be quashed and against the directors. The only point that the Supreme Court held, where for some legal snatch, the company cannot be made as an accused. Suppose the company is wound up. So for a legal hitch, if the company cannot be made as an accused, in only those cases the directors themselves be prosecuted, and it is not necessary to make the company as an accused. So therefore, this was one very important judgment which is still followed, Anita Hada versus Godfather Travels. It is there are 2 of the judgments, so please don't get confused. It is the one by 3 judges. So these are some of the important judgments, landmark judgments of the Supreme Court, which have evolved the law on corporate criminal liability. And like I had said earlier, I'll keep it short because I know the number of webinars over the last 2 months, I think the capacity for everyone has decreased. But this covers the law and the entire subject, and I will take any questions that anybody may have on what has been discussed.
Sir, I think there are no questions left now.
Okay.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for enlightening us on today's topic. It was indeed a very informative session for all of us, and I am sure the same will surely help in uplifting our profession to the new height. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.